You have to give me a little brief on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you do, because I think what you're building for education is very interesting, and it does solve for the fact that a teacher cannot pay attention to everybody and see where they're at. Yeah.
Can I just say that, before I tell you this, and it'll make the story clearer,
Okay, yeah.
right? When I went to the US, I studied to be a molecular biologist, and I was doing research on oncogenes
Mm-hmm.
at Stanford. And I had to give that up because I became pregnant with my first child. Unfortunately, pregnancy and radioactivity that I had to use a lot of don't mix.
Yeah.
So I had to give that up.
Right.
And then I had 4 children, and I asked myself, what can I do for my children? Like all Indian parents, we realize that education is a path out of wherever we are.
Right.
My parents gave us a fabulous education. They couldn't afford it for themselves, but they gave up everything. All the money went towards our education. So I started getting into education at that point. I found a great school which was all child-centric.
Hmm.
No textbooks.
No textbooks.
No textbooks.
Hmm.
It was built upon basically like a project, and a child would have to figure out what that project would entail, right? And there are lots of backs and negatives and positives about that. But the idea was to make them free-thinking, problem-solving, creative young human beings. So they could, very early on start adding to the world rather than getting burnt out and kind of saying, well, I can't do well, I don't know how to do math, so I'm never going to be able to do math, dropping out by the time you get into high school, which is what happens in India too.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
The kids who can't get help, and they are the majority.
They give up.
Yes.
They psychologically give up.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And so much contribution to the world is lost because of that.
Exactly.
Right.
So how can we make it? Of course, we have this tiered approach to the value you bring in, the value a doctor brings, the value but why not to a plumber? Could you live in a house if your plumbing is broken?
No, I can't.
Right?
Yeah.
So that person should be equally treated. Teachers, right? Teachers aren't paid or even honored enough.
Yeah.
Kyun?
And it's a great loss because teachers spend so much time with the next generation, right? I feel like that is a vicious cycle. They're not paid enough. They're not happy. So the kids they teach are not happy. And then it just repeats into infinity.
It's a flywheel,
Yeah.
right? And we don't know how to get off those flywheels.
If I say something as simple as, can you go back to a time where you were taught by a great teacher, we can all imagine a face suddenly. A great teacher is so impactful you can never forget. But most teachers are not great teachers because the great teacher is the exception from the rule, right?
I remember when I was a little kid, I was probably in the 8th grade, and this teacher asked us all to draw a cell. Of course, I'd lost my confidence in education. And so I drew something, and she had asked everyone to come show her. So she asked me to come show her. And so she looked at it and she goes, "What's this?" Right? I said, "Ma'am, it's a cell." "No, it's not. This is such a poor drawing." And I said, "Ma'am, my pencil kept breaking." And her response was, "A bad toolsman always blames
The tools.
tools." I think that stayed in my mind, and I wanted to take away. Eventually, I didn't realize how strong that feeling was, that we shouldn't blame the tools if the tools are not perfect. Yes, a carbon-based pencil is going to break.
Right.
And you're giving me an excuse to do that. Instead of asking me, explain to me what that drawing meant to you. What were the components? Okay, you can't draw, but you can talk about it. You can, you can dance about it. You can, the different modalities. We learned chemistry. We learned electricity reading a textbook.
Right.
Right?
Right.
How can you even imagine an electron? Unless you can have a simulation or some level of interactive movement going. This is where we are today. We can take avail of all this. Kind of a representation of the real world through digital learning.
Are you saying we can use modern media and stuff to sort of make learning more visualizable?
It's not just visualizable. It's more about what's the best way to learn something. Imagine having to, you read a poem just by watching a painting. Would you know what words were in that poem?
No.
Right?
Yeah.
You need the words.
Yes.
For physics, you need to know the atoms. You need to be able to imagine those things. So the world is very complex. What if we could bring these basic things together and then tell you at each step where it's going wrong? And that's what we built. We started with the content. We made the content customizable. Only way you can do that, because you're not going to print. Once print is done, it's permanent. You'll have to go back through the print process.
Right.
But the digital world will give you the ability to take the print and customize.
ब्रो, अगर ये सुन के आपको मजा आया किसी भी एंड तक, अगर आप यहाँ तक देख रहे हो तो मजा आया ही, ठीक है? अपने आप से बात मत करो फालतू की. एक काम करो, सब्सक्राइब. ट्रस्ट मी.